Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. So since many of you are in your second and third trimesters, I thought I'd talk a little about what my postpartum experiences were. If you're a first time mom and you don't have any close friends or relatives that have given birth recently, you might be wondering what it actually feels like to have a baby at home. And if you ask older women like your mom or your grandma, they'll always say that yes, it's going to be really hard, but you'll get through it, you'll be fine. So it's been a few years for them, right? So I just wanted to talk about these things while it's still fresh in my memory. The postpartum period lasts from birth to about 6 weeks after the baby is born. And if I'm being honest, I have mixed feelings about this period, because on one hand I was completely overjoyed, of course, to finally meet my baby and spend time with him, and everyone around me was really excited, so there was this mood of celebration in the house. But on the other hand, I was completely exhausted from giving birth, and if you have a C-section, you have the surgery to recover from, so physically it was very draining. And I had some challenges postpartum, like every woman has, and getting adjusted to this new change in your life, and of course lack of sleep. So physically it was very exhausting, but mentally I was really happy. What helped me was, before I left the hospital, my doctors told me that even though you're feeling nice and happy now, you might hit a low a few weeks after you go home, and because your hormones go back to their normal levels, and lots of women experience baby blues, and if it gets too severe, it's called postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression, and you should always talk to your doctor if you have trouble like bonding with your baby. But it was good to know this, because I definitely hit a low a few weeks after Vikrant was born. I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks. So it was good to know that it's hormonal and it's completely normal to go through this. So the first few weeks, the baby's schedule can be anything, because every baby is different. But usually babies nurse or feed every 1 to 2 hours, and they sleep a lot. So they sleep for, I think, 22 hours a day. But this doesn't mean you get to sleep between those times. They say you should sleep when the baby sleeps, but you never get a long stretch of sleep. It's always in short bits, so you don't get that quality rest that you actually need at that time. So Vikrant was up every 2 hours like clockwork. He would get up to feed, and then we had to change his diaper, burp him, and then put him back to sleep again. And all this took like at least half an hour. And so one of the first challenges we faced was Vikrant was a little jaundiced, so his bilirubin levels were a little high, and the doctors gave him phototherapy for 3 days in the hospital. So he was put under UV lamps. Infant jaundice is very common, especially in Asians. So we didn't worry too much about it, but for 3 days he was in the incubator with those blue UV lamps, and after 3 days we brought him back home, and every morning we would put him in the sun, in direct sunlight, for I think half an hour or so, and he got over it really well. So when you have a newborn, infant jaundice is something you can be on the lookout for. Just watch for signs like if your baby is a little yellow or a little more drowsy or sleepy than normal. Definitely get it checked out by a doctor. And since I was breastfeeding, it felt like I was nursing him 24 hours a day. If you are going to breastfeed your baby, I would suggest looking up information online, or taking a class before you give birth, because they make it sound like breastfeeding is this most natural thing that comes to women, but it can be a struggle in the beginning. With getting the baby to latch on and getting up your supply and engorgement, and there's so many other issues that I'll talk about in another video. But for me, first 3 or 4 weeks were hard in terms of breastfeeding, and then we fell into a nice rhythm, and it has been smooth ever since. So my plan with breastfeeding was I was going to give it my 100% and try to make it work. But for some reason, if it didn't work, I wasn't going to stress out or feel guilty. I was just going to find the best infant formula. There's just so many infant formulas that are really good these days. And I was just going to give my baby formula if I had to. So I ended up not using formula after all, and I was breastfeeding most of the time and pumping some of the time. Vikrant was a very calm baby for the first 3 or 4 weeks of his life, and after that he became really fussy and cranky, and we didn't understand what was going on. I later learned that babies' digestive systems are not that mature in the beginning because they've always got their nutrition from the umbilical cord, and suddenly they have to, break down milk to get their energy. So it takes them some time to make this, adjustment, I guess. And so that causes some of the crying and fussiness. And if the crying gets out of hand, like if the baby has been crying for more than 3 hours, they say you should go to the hospital because the baby might have colic. So between 5 weeks to 8 weeks, Vikrant would be fussy even after we have fed him and burped him. So we also realized that there's a pretty big growth spurt that happens, the baby's first growth spurt that happens at about 5 weeks of age. That could also contribute to a little bit of the fussiness. We found use in a baby tracker software. Just on my phone, it's an app, but you can just use a notepad to track the feeds and the diaper changes, because the doctor always asked whenever we had any issue, how many times has the baby's diaper been changed, and how many feeds has he had, and how long has he been, sleeping in between feeds. So I found this baby tracker app really helpful, but you can just use a notepad and just make a note of times when you change diapers and feeds. I used the app, I think, for 1 month of his life, and after that I think we just got used to it. But once he got through the growth spurt and started to digest milk more efficiently, he went back to his normal self again. We gave Vikrant his first bath after his belly button fell off. So they say you shouldn't submerge the belly button in water because it might get infected. So in the first few days, we would just wipe him with a wet washcloth, and then once his belly button fell off, we started to give him a light massage and a bath very carefully because he was still so fragile and tiny. So this is what my days pretty much looked like in the beginning. I would just be feeding him every couple of hours or so, and then just burping him, which would take another 5 or 10 minutes, and changing his diaper, which would be 10 to 12 times a day sometimes, and putting him back to sleep. And in a couple of hours, it would start all over again. So somehow I would just find time to take short naps and eat food. Even though it feels like there's nothing much going on, my days would always be full, and this would go on round the clock, right? So I wouldn't know when one day is ending and when the next day is beginning. So my suggestion would be not to worry about things like cleaning the house or looking presentable even, and even maybe cooking food. If you have people who can help you, do not hesitate to take help, both physically and emotionally, because we need a lot of support in the first few weeks. So if you have people around that can give you that kind of support, excellent. If you do not have people around, take help from online communities. You can go on websites like Baby Center. I found Baby Center to be a great resource because all these women in my birth club had babies close to when I had my baby, so I could relate to what they were going through. Like, all the babies were going through a growth spurt around the same time, so I could see that, okay, even though my baby is going through a tough time, it is completely normal because all babies are going through that. So the point I'm trying to make is take support and don't feel like you have to do this all by yourself. Even though it sounds like this postpartum time is really hard, we had a lot of really sweet moments that we are going to remember for the rest of our lives, because this newborn phase is never going to come back and your baby is never going to be this tiny again. One of the things that I loved about the first few days after Vikrant was born is the skin to skin time that we did. So the doctors told me that the first 3 months of the baby's life is called the fourth trimester, and this is when the baby is still getting used to the outside world, and you need to spend as much time as possible holding him close to you, not just for warmth but also for comfort. So we did a lot of skin to skin bonding, and that was one of my favorite things, because once in a while he would just look up at us and give you a sleepy smile or yawn or a little sneeze, and it was so cute because I would always wonder, where did you learn to do this stuff? Where did you learn to scratch your nose like that? So it was so tender and so precious for us. Another thing you don't want to miss in the beginning is the baby's first social smile. They do smile a lot when they're newborns because of gas or whatever. But when they're 4 or 5 weeks of age, I think Vikrant was about 4 weeks when he gave out his first social smile. So that's when they're looking at you and they recognize your face and they give you an actual real smile. So you don't want to miss that. So make sure you capture that on a camera. So I don't know if I've left something out, but all in all, the postpartum time was a very eventful time in my life, and I'm always going to look back on it with a lot of fondness. So if you're getting close to your due date, all the best to you. I'm sure you'll do great. And remember that women have been doing this for thousands of years. And I'll end by saying what your mother or your grandmother already said, that it's going to be tough, but you will get through it. You will be fine. Remember to live in each moment, because you're going to always remember these days with your baby. And take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.